added. I think I added the wrong PowerPoint. Let me see.
That's fine, Sheikh. Take your time.
I uploaded it, subhanAllah, this morning, immediately before the session. And I think you added most of them, right?
I believe so.
Okay. I think you just give me. I will I will go out of the session for 3 minutes to upload it again because subhanallah I uploaded but it didn't work.
Take your time, inshallah.
I have to forgive me for this interruption.
No, that's
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everybody can hear me?
Perfect. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
This is the correct version, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين ورحمة الله للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our fifth session on Mustalah al-Hadith or Hadith sciences. In today's session, we are going to discuss the classification of Hadith. So, first of all, we will discuss the criteria the scholars proposed for the classification of a Hadith. Secondly, we will discuss the classification of Hadith according to authority. And finally, classification of Hadith according to the number of narrators. These are the references that we referred in preparing our PowerPoint and also preparing this session. What are the criteria of classifying the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? The scholars classify the hadith according to four major criteria. At the beginning, I would like to emphasize that those criteria may overlap, meaning hadith may be actually classified or according to its authority, which means that according to the reference to its reference to a particular authority, and at the same time it may be identified by reference to its authenticity. So the hadith, if we classify it according to authority into marfu' and mawquf, so the mawquf may be sahih or hasan or da'if. The marfu' may be sahih, authentic, or hasan, fairly authentic or da'if. It may be also muttasil or munqati'. You understand what I'm saying? So these classifications overlap. This is a general rule that we need to pay our attention to. The scholars identified four major criteria for the classification of the ahadith. The first criteria is by reference to its authority, or what we can call the author, or the one, or by reference to a particular authority. A statement or a hadith in this case may be classified into hadith Qudsi, which is referred to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, though the wording are from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Second is marfu'. Marfu' literally means elevated, and it refers to the hadith which is stated by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or describes his state or narrates his tacit approval. So it may narrate a statement which is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or any of his actions or tacit approvals. And the mawquf, it is the statement of a sahabi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and maqtu' is the statement of a tabi'i. Anyhow, we will go in detail, inshallah, about explaining those terms as a whole. So according to reference to a particular authority, a statement or a hadith may be hadith Qudsi, marfu', mawquf, or maqtu'. According to the number of the reporters and the possibility of their agreement to fabricate a lie or not, the possibility and impossibility of their agreement to fabricate a lie, the hadith may be classified into two major groups. mutawatir, and ahad. We is, and according to the Ahnaf, they added another one, which is al-Hadith al-Mustafid, which is between ahad and mutawatir. So we have this is the second category, or this is second criteria. The third criteria is the classification of hadith according to the links included in the isnad, or what we can call the continuity and discontinuity of the chain of transmission. It may be classified into muttasil and munqati. And the munqati itself, which is translated as dissevered or discontinued, it includes a number of other categories, like, for example, al-mu'dal, al-mu'an'an, al-mu'an'an, al-hadith al-mursal, etc. So we are going to discuss all those types, inshallah. And the fifth category, or the fifth criteria, is the classification of hadith according to its reliability, or according to its authenticity. And in this case, the hadith is further classified into four types: Sahih, Hasan, and Sahih is classified into Sahihun lidatihi, Sahihun lighayrihi, authentic by itself and authentic by extra evidence, and Hasan, fairly authentic by itself and fairly authentic by virtue of other additional evidences. And finally, Da'if. And the Da'if is the weak hadith, which is further also classified by reference to the number of, or to the criteria which we adopted to regard it as da'if. Like, for example, the da'if may be because of the isnad, the da'if may be because of the narrator, the da'if may be, yani, for, there are different reasons for the weakness in the hadith. So classifications of hadith according to reference to particular authority, number of reporters, according to the link included in the isnad, and according to the reliability of the hadith. First of all, let us go through the classification of hadith according to its authority. Classification of religious texts according to their authority is either marfu', or it is a divine text which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is either a Quran or a Hadith Qudsi or divine tradition. Mawquf, which is stopped, literally translated as stopped, or its source is a Sahabi, a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a maqtu', severed, which is a statement attributed to a tabi'i, a succeeding generation following the generation of the Sahaba of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First of all, the Quran, we know that the Quran is the speech of Allah uncreated, which has been revealed to the Prophet ﷺ through Jibreel alayhi salam in the span of 23 years, which is included in the mushafs which were written by Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu ta'ala anhu. This is a technical definition of the Quran, and this is very well known. About divine hadith. A divine hadith is the text whose isnad ends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives an indication that this statement goes back to Allah. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam reports it in this way, on the authority of Ibn Umar, for example, or Umar ibn al-Khattab, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says what he attributes to Allah. Or the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Though the wording of this text is from the Messenger ﷺ, but the exact meaning, the meaning goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which has divinely inspired to the Messenger ﷺ. This is the reason that the Prophet ﷺ attributes it to Allah. So this is the meaning of the divine hadith. This is a text whose isnad ends with Allah, and it includes the Quran and divine hadith. I'm sorry, this is the divine hadith. It doesn't include the Quran, but it is includes only the hadiths which are attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Divine hadith is always, as I mentioned, related to one of the following in one of those two frequent forms. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ said, from among the saints, he relates from his Lord that he said. So in this case, the Prophet ﷺ confirms that the end of the isnad goes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the highest authority. The second form is that the Messenger ﷺ said, Allah said in what is related by the Prophet. This is a Sahabi, says, Allah said in what is related by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are some remarks on the divine hadith which should be put into consideration. Sometimes the divine hadith is narrated in the form of a prophetic tradition, which means that sometimes the content of the hadith includes some statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and others which are attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this case, this hadith, the hadith Qudsi or the divine hadith, is a part of the prophetic tradition or the prophetic hadith. An example is the hadith which is related by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu as an elevated report of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a believer is always in the state of godness. He praises me, although I take his soul from his body. So this is a typical form of purely hadith, which is Qudsi. It's a divine hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But sometimes the Prophet ﷺ says certain occasions or hadith, like for example, when the Prophet ﷺ reports the story of a person, the story of the last person who would actually leave the hellfire and will be admitted to the Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ quotes the conversation which would happen between this slave of Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this last example, the Prophet ﷺ mentions statements, it is his words, and he includes in his prophetic tradition other statements or phrases which are attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another remark is that divine traditions are dominantly admonitions and exhortations. So mostly we do not derive legal rulings from those ahadith. We may have some legal rulings, but in most cases they are implicit. They are not explicitly included. Because in most cases they are admonitions, instructive lessons, commands, like for example the hadith of the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the prohibition of dhulm, injustice, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about people's need to Allah. So another point about divine hadith is that divine hadith are not great in number, and some scholars counted them as 200, and this is the view of al-Haythami, and others maintain more than that, but it is basically the divine ahadith are few in number. And most of the divine ahadith or divine traditions are either weak or fabricated, and some of them are authentic, especially those which are included in the books of authentic ahadith, such as an Imam al-Bukhari's Sahih and Imam Muslim's Sahih. But the massive majority of the divine, most of them, they are weak. If we refer to the difference between the Quran and al-Hadith al-Qudsiyya and the prophetic traditions, say that the noble Quran or the Quran is a miracle that Allah has made a challenge for all humankind and the jinn. This is not the case of the Qudsi hadith. So the Hadith al-Qudsi is not, it does not have the case of inimitability or i'jaz with regard to its wording, content, and meaning. The Quran alone is mu'jiz because it has been revealed to defy and to challenge the people of Quraysh and the disbelievers throughout the stages, all stages of history. But this is not actually the case of divine hadith. You know, reciting the Quran is a form of ibadah, according to the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever recites a letter of the Quran, he will be granted a good deed. He will be graded a good deed, and this good deed will be multiplied up to 10 and 700. But the Qudsi hadith is not an act of worship. Reading and reciting al hadith al Qudsi is not an act of worship. That's why Al Quran al Kareem is only recited in prayer, can be recited in prayer. But Al Hadith al Qudsi or divine hadith is not permissible to recite it in one's prayer or salah. Number four, the Noble Quran was transmitted in numerous people by tawatur. Uh, but the divine hadith is mostly ahad. No divine hadith was transmitted to us in tawatur, as you know. And we are going to explain tawatur. But basically, tawatur is the transmission of a large number of people from a large number of people in each generation and stage of history. And those people are impossible to collide or to meet together to fabricate a lie. So the Quran was transmitted by numerous people throughout the stages of its transmission, all the way until it reached us. But this condition or this state is not fulfilled in the or by the divine ahadith. It's forbidden to recite the Noble Quran by meaning, but it's permissible to recite or read the divine ahadith by meaning, and also the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ by meaning. This is basically, my brothers, before the publication, before the compilation of the books of hadith. But after the compilation of the books of hadith, not possible for anybody to quote the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in meaning, as long as we have the books which recorded the statements and were very known. But the divine hadith, it's not verbatim. It's not verbatim. So when we quote the Quran, we quote it verbatim. But before, at the time of the Sahaba could report the hadith by meaning, not word for word, as the Prophet ﷺ received it. Sometimes they got the concept and they transmitted it in their own words. But this is not the case of the Noble Quran. It's not forbidden. Yes, it's like paraphrasing. Exactly. They could actually paraphrase and form it in their own words. The opposite of paraphrasing is verbatim, right? Or verbatim. The Quran is preserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this is not guaranteed for the divine hadith and the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why I mentioned to you that some of those hadiths have been criticized, or some of them have been regarded as not authentic. The denial of any word or less than a word in any one ayah of the Noble Quran which was transmitted by tawatur is apostasy and blasphemy. Which means that's not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved the Quran. When we talk about, for example, when we talk about some deviant sects, we say that if those sects believe that the Quran in our possession right now is deficient in the sense that some parts of it have been deleted, so this deviant sect is easily labeled as kafir, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that explicitly in the Quran. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guaranteed the preservation of the Quran al-Kareem. But it's not with the case of the divine hadith and other. So a person's rejection or denial of just a word of the Quran, it means that he is a kafir. What are the prominent compilations of divine ahadith? We have different compilations. On the top of them is Al-Imam Abdul Rauf Al-Munawi, and he is one of the latecomers. He compiled the divine ahadith in Al-Ithafat Al-Saniyya bil-Ahadith Al-Qudsiyya. His book includes more than 2,720, 272 ahadith or divine ahadith. Also, there is a very important book which included only the authentic divine ahadith. This is by Sheikh Mustafa Al-Adawi, Al-Sahih. His book is called Al-Sahih Al-Musnad min al-Ahadith al-Qudsiyya. The authentic ahadith which are supported with isnad and are ahadith Qudsiyya or divine ahadith which are claimed to be authentic and supported with uninterrupted chain of isnad. You remember when we said that the word musnad means what? The word musnad means uninterrupted hadith which is uninterruptedly connected or has a connected chain of transmission all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Imam al-Bukhari also, the name of his book is what? Can anybody remind me? What is the exact name of Imam Bukhari's book? Does anybody remember? This is a well-known title, Al-Jami' al-Sahih of al-Bukhari. But anybody knows the complete name? There is a complete name, a long name. Anybody knows? It is called, nobody knows? It is called Al-Jami' al-Sahih al-Musnad من أحاديث النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأيامه. So you called it Al-Jami' al-Musnad. Al-Jami' al-Musnad, why? Because it includes only ahadith which have full isnads all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Sheikh Mustafa Al-Adawi, he wrote a book, recompiled Al-Sahih Al-Musnad min al-Ahadith al-Qudsiyya, the authentic ahadith, the authentic divine ahadith, and this include only the, and also Isam ad-Din al-Sabiti wrote a book which is called Jami' al-Hadith al-Qudsiyya in 3 volumes, and it included more than 1,150 weak divine traditions. He talked about weak ahadith or weak divine traditions. Marfu' or elevated hadith. What is the marfu'? So now we explain the divine ahadith. The second category of the ahadith or the classification of hadith with reference to their authority is al-hadith al-marfu', the elevated hadith. What is elevated hadith? Elevated hadith or al-hadith al-marfu' is a hadith which is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this hadith includes what? It includes a saying or an action, or it reports a tacit approval of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's called marfu' in the sense that it is something which has been attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to another definition, Al-Baghdadi says it consists of what a companion has reported concerning a saying, act, tacit approval, or a person attribute of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I think there is no difference between it and the previous definition. So the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or the marfu' hadith, it is a statement of a companion describing what the Prophet ﷺ says, or quoting what the Prophet ﷺ says, describing what the Prophet ﷺ did, or narrating what the Prophet ﷺ tacitly approved. This is the elevated hadith. An example is the first hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari about the importance of intention. Can anybody repeat for me the first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari in Arabic? Does anybody memorize it? Remember, we said that memorization of Umdat al-Ahkam, and this is only also the first hadith in Umdat al-Ahkam. Who memorized this hadith? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Sheikh, I memorized it. If you'd like me to say it.
Naam.
I've memorized the hadith, I think. Would you like me to say it?
Yes, go ahead.
إنما الأعمال بالنيات وفي رواية بالنية ولكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كان هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كان هجرته إلى دنيا يصيبها أو امرأة يتزوجها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه.
جزاك الله خيرا. ما شاء الله. ما شاء الله. بارك الله فيكم. There is a question there is a question here. Doesn't that make a large portion of a hadith marfu'a? Yes, the hadith marfu'a are very big. The hadith marfu'a of the Prophet ﷺ, they are they are great in number. If we take into consideration that each hadith of them was reported through different chains of transmissions. This is the marfu' hadith, and this marfu' is haqiqi. Is there a difference between marfu' and musnad? Some scholars use the terms marfu' and they also use the term musnad. And you remember, I just said that musnad is actually a hadith which is supported with an uninterrupted chain of authorities. Some scholars, they use the marfu' and the musnad interchangeably. And this is, I think, the usage of the Imam al-Bukhari, because he said that's musnad. And Imam al-Bukhari refers that he does not include the mawquf or the maqtu' hadith except in the titles in his book. So the majority of scholars, they use marfu' and musnad interchangeably. There is, however, a distinction between the two, if there is, because the marfu' refers to a raised tradition which may have an interrupted or uninterrupted chain of narrators, while the musnad is exclusively restricted to continuously uninterrupted isnad. See, there is a difference between them. So if there is a difference, we say that the marfu' is any hadith which is attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whether this hadith was attributed to him through a continuous chain of isnad or through an interrupted chain of isnad. So if it has a deficiency or not, so call it marfu'. But the musnad is the tradition which is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, but it secures a continuous chain of transmission. So it doesn't have any deficiency at any point or any stage of the transmission of the hadith. This is basically the difference between marfu' and musnad, if there is, which means that some people didn't use that in this form. So some of them, they used it interchangeably. So every musnad is marfu', but not every marfu' is musnad. Exactly. Jazakallahu khairan ya Aba Abdullah. Aba Abdullah. Aba Abdullah, he gave us a very concise statement, like a legal maxim. Not so every musnad is marfu', but not every marfu' is a musnad. Jazakallahu khair. Forms of elevated marfu' hadith. What are the forms which are given to us? Number one, a statement of a companion which has a strong clue implying that it was received from the Prophet ﷺ. So sometimes rafa' or elevation is expressed in the statement of a Sahabi. Like for example, the Sahabi, he gives an indication in the wording of his statement or in the wording of his hadith to give us a hint that he elevated it to the Prophet ﷺ, or he heard it from the Prophet ﷺ, or he ascribes it to the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes this is reported by a tabi'i, like the hadith that you see in front of you. حدثنا أبو خثيمة حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله الأسدي حدثنا إسرائيل عن أبي إسحاق عن محمد بن سعد عن أبيه يرفع الحديث قال لا يحل لأحد أن يهجر أخاه فوق ثلاث. An example of this type of report is what is related by Abu Ya'la al-Musili from Abu Khaythama, from Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Asdi, from Israel, from Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, from Muhammad ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, from his father, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, elevating the hadith. Look, Muhammad, the son of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, is saying that his father reported the hadith and he elevated it to the Prophet ﷺ. Why he said that statement? Because maybe that this hadith has been reported by other people and they did not indicate whether it is a statement of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas or it is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So his son came here in this hadith and he confirmed that this statement is elevated to the Prophet ﷺ. So there is an indication that Sa'd showed to his son to see that, to show that it is a statement which is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes a report of a companion whose subject matter cannot entirely rely on personal reasoning is considered an elevated report with a proviso that such a companion is not known for reporting Israeliyat or Jewish traditions. Let me comment on this statement. So sometimes the statement itself can never ever be said by a Sahabi. So it doesn't like, for example, when the Sahabi is talking about a reward that a person will receive in the day of judgment. So in this case, it's not possible that the Sahabi is saying this out of his own whim or desire, and he did not actually receive it from the Prophet ﷺ. So we say that this content most probably presupposes that the Sahabi have received it from the Prophet ﷺ. But on two conditions, you see, number one, this content is regarding something which he cannot say out of his own whim and desire. And number two, we make sure that this Sahabi did not quote the Israeliyat. What are the Israeliyat? Israeliyat are the Judeo-Christian materials which the Sahaba referred to understand the text of the Quran or to fill some historical gaps. We have some historical gaps in the history of Islam, especially with regard to the history of prophets and messengers. So those reporters used to quote some of the statements or some of the stories which were mentioned in the Bible at the time. Why do they refer to this? Because they actually have contact with the people of the book, Or some of them, they were actually Christians and Jews before accepting Islam, and some of them, they were actually rabbis. Like, for example, Abdullah ibn Salam. Abdullah ibn Salam was a rabbi, a Jewish rabbi. So he could quote actually some. So is it not permissible or permissible? The Prophet ﷺ allowed them at the beginning. The Messenger ﷺ said, وَحَدِّثُوا عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا حَرَجٍ. A report from or about the people of Israel, and there is no blame on you. So these Israeliyat, which were inserted and added by those reporters and narrators, cannot be regarded as statements of the Prophet ﷺ. So to regard hadith as being elevated to the Messenger ﷺ, number one, it shouldn't be regarded as something which can be said by anybody except the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, it doesn't belong to the Israeliyat. How to be cautious about it? That the companion is not one of those who were famous for reporting or quoting the Israeliyat. Like whom? Like, for example, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Amr, he lived in Sham, in Syria, and it is quoted that he used actually to quote some of those Israeliyat. This is when exactly, my brothers and sisters, this is when we have a statement which is not explicitly attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a content, it's a hadith which says something which can only be known from the Prophet. And we make sure that the Sahabi under discussion is not of those who usually quote the people of the book. An example of this is the report which is proved as one of the sayings of the Prophet is the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, in which he reports the Prophet as saying, whoever recites Surah Al-Kahf on Friday, an illumination will be lightened between him and Al-Bayt Al-Atiq. This hadith is from Abu Abdullah al-Hafiz, from Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn al-Mu'ammal, from Al-Fadl ibn Muhammad al-Sha'rani, and Na'im ibn Hammad. At the end, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri says that the Prophet says, من قرأ سورة الكهف في يوم الجمعة أضاء له من النور ما بين الجمعتين. In fact, this is the standard version of the hadith. But there is another version of the hadith which does not say that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri reported this from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what I'm saying? So the example that I should actually put to you is not included here. The example should be actually read that without having the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You understand what I'm saying? So it is as if Abu Sa'id al-Khudri say, من قرأ سورة الكهف في يوم الجمعة أضاء له من النور ما بين الجمعتين. But the version that I give to you, it is another version, parallel, and it has been reported as being elevated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can I ask you a question, my brothers and sisters? If we don't have the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this report, can we say that this is a hadith? This is an elevated hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It depends on what? Mustafa Umar says it's hukmi. It fulfills the first condition, which is that can only be said by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. But imagine that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, its reward is unseen. Exactly. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, imagine that he was involved in reporting a hadith from the Christians and Jews. Can we say that imagine that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is one of those who reported Israeliyat. Can we say that this hadith is not elevated? Can anybody answer? Imagine that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is already involved in reporting Israeliyat. Okay, not confidently. No, it doesn't need this. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, because this statement can never ever be quoted from the Jews and Christians sources. Surah Al-Kahf came after, yes. So the nature of the content itself suggests that it's not Judeo-Christian source. It's not taken from a Judeo-Christian source. Right. There are certain forms in the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which suggest and strongly suggest that it is elevated. Like, for example, when a saying of the companion contains a reference such as, we were commanded to do such and such, or we were prohibited to do such and such. Why? Because the only authority at their time who had the authority, the only one who has the authority to command and to forbid them is only the Prophet ﷺ. We were forbidden to do such and such. We used to do such and such. We used to say such and such while the Messenger of Allah was among us. We didn't used to mind such and such. It is used to be said such and such. It is from the Sunnah to do such and such. Such a verse of the Quran was revealed in the following circumstances. All of those forms are part of the hukmi elevated hadith. It's a hadith, it's elevated, but it's hukmi. It's like virtual. We can say virtually it is elevated hadith, but not literally. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ is not reported as saying it by himself. So the point here, if we say there is a form which is controversial, scholars of hadith are in disagreement on the classification of incidents related by a companion which occurred during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. Let me explain this for you. If something happens at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, can we regard it as an elevated hadith? Taqreer. No, this taqreer, let me explain for you. This taqreer is of different forms. Sometimes something happens in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. So he is sitting with them and he approved them eating a certain type of food, but he didn't eat it himself. So in this case, the Prophet ﷺ is reported as approving this act, right? And the Prophet ﷺ can never ever approve anything haram. But anyhow, his approval is a part of elevated hadith, right? We don't have any controversy about this issue, right? Everybody agrees with this. We used to do actions. What about the narration where the companions say we used to do such action while the Quran was being revealed? This is what I'm asking you about. Like, for example, withdrawal. This case has two subcategories. So we have, if the approval of the Prophet ﷺ or disapproval was reported in a situation where the Prophet ﷺ was engaged in witness and we witnessed the incident, so there is no controversy about it. But if the Prophet ﷺ haven't seen it, it has two possibilities. Number one might be that the Sahaba informed the Prophet ﷺ about it, and that's why afterwards he approved or disapproved. Or the Prophet ﷺ having known, he didn't know about it. Like, for example, what is the ruling of coitus interruptus? Coitus interruptus is withdrawal before ejaculation, actual ejaculation, which a method that Sahaba used to prevent pregnancy. Jabir ibn Abdullah said in the authentic hadith, "Kunna na'zil wal Quran yanzil." We used to practice coitus interruptus while the Quran was being revealed. We used to have withdrawal while the Prophet the Quran was being revealed. So it means that the Prophet ﷺ, but in this case, there is a possibility that the Prophet ﷺ had received knowledge about it, but anyhow, apparently or explicitly, we say that the Sahaba regard it as an elevated hadith. And there is another report from Ibn Umar that the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ was afraid of secretly giving or secretly talking to their wives about topics because they were afraid that the revelation comes and condemns them, which means that everything was monitored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if anything wrong, he would have actually informed the Prophet ﷺ about it, and he would tell them. So the controversy or disagreement among scholars whether to regard as elevated or not falls in incidents which the Prophet ﷺ didn't hear, didn't know. He didn't receive any information whether he didn't know. So in this case, his tacit approval is regarded as elevated or not. This is a disagreement among scholars. Some of them accepted it as a part of, and others did not. You understand what I'm saying? An example of this is the hadith of Malik ibn al-Huwayrith. You remember the hadith of Malik ibn al-Huwayrith when they came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, him and his people, and they started learning or studying from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when they returned back, they found that the child at the age of 7, he was actually the only one who knows most of the Quran. So they proceeded him to become their imam. And when he led the people in imama, in congregation, he was a child. So he didn't have an underwear, so his aura was exposed. So the women saw that. And a woman saw the aura and told the people, oh, cover the aura of your imam, please. And they gave him a garment. So subhanallah. So in this case, the Prophet ﷺ didn't know about this story. So the question raises, is it possible when a person uncovers his aura uh, during prayer and afterwards he covers it, is his prayer valid or not? It depends on the controversy whether to regard it as an elevated hadith or not. So it is a matter of the controversy or disagreement among scholars. So these are some of the forms. Another controversial issue on elevated hadith is the companions making exegesis of specific verses of the Quran or interpretation of certain verses of the Quran. And those commentaries would be regarded as prophetic traditions or not, if they relate an occasion of the revelation of a specific ayah or surah, chapter, although the report is not clearly attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. And other commentaries of the companions will be regarded as mawquf unless the subject matter of the report provides a strong indication that it cannot rely on the personal reasoning of a companion. So briefly, we can say the exegesis or the interpretation of specific verses by the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ can be regarded as prophetic traditions if they relate an occasion of the revelation. If they relate an occasion of the revelation. And this is briefly, I would like to stop at this point, inshallah, and we will continue next week because I think we have just finished and I think it is late for you. Everybody wants to leave. So we will, inshallah, stop at this point at the elevated hadith. And next time, inshallah, we will continue explaining the same lesson. Please, if you have any questions or inquiries, inshallah, don't hesitate in raising them. Jazakumullahu khair. A question is, what is then the difference between Hadith Qudsi and Hadith Nabawi? Hadith Nabawi, both of them have been inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet sallallahu, but the divine Hadith has been inspired, has been delivered to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through Jibreel, informing him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to do this and this, but the Prophet sallallahu is given the freedom to coin it in his own words. To coin it in his own words. That's why he attributes it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he received it directly from Jibreel. But at the same time, he was not commanded to, he was given the freedom or the choice to coin it in his own words. The Hadith al-Nabawi, it is the Prophet's words, his own thoughts, his own actions, though they have been divinely inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nah. Any further question? Another question, do the Acharya have a different interpretation of Hadith Qudsi? Yes, I think the Acharya, they have a different perspective about the Quran, because the Acharya, they see that the Quran is an internal speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, it's psychological speech of Allah, which means that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to himself. So when he reveals it in Arabic, it becomes a Quran. In Hebrew, it is kalamun nafsi. Exactly. So to get rid of the controversy that they had with regard to al-Hadith al-Qudsi, they have to find another definition for the divine Hadith. You understand what I'm saying? That's why, because it's this is the same is applicable to al-Hadith al-Nafsi. It's the same applicable to al-Hadith al-Qudsi, because it is a thought which is delivered to the Prophet ﷺ, and then he coins it in his own words. This is a reason that they had to explain al-Hadith al-Qudsi in a different way. Any further questions, my brothers and sisters? Okay, barakallahu feekum, and see you inshallah. I think there is maybe one, somebody sent. The light of Surah An-Najm 3 and 4, can one of them say the things that Rasulullah physically speaks of has a higher importance? Yes, it is, for sure, because it's everything is divinely inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'm talking about Hadith al-Qudsi, it has been specifically delivered to the Prophet ﷺ in a specific occasion. That's why the Prophet ﷺ attributes it to Allah, but he does not attribute his own statements to Allah. You understand? So this is the only reason why the Prophet ﷺ attributes it to Allah. So it means that has been revealed to him by Jibreel, saying him that this is the meaning, but the Prophet ﷺ coined it in his own words. Barakallahu feekum jami'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower his mercy upon all of us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we will not have, inshallah, a quiz for this lesson. I will wait until we finish it next week, inshallah. But we will have a quiz for Umdat al-Ahkam, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah. See you, brother Muhammad.
See you soon, inshallah, on Thursday.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.